I introduce to you our next speaker, Gennady Estraikh, clinical professor and a director of the undergraduate students studies at the Skirball Department of Hebrew and Judaic Studies at New York University. Estraich's research spans Jewish intellectual history, Yiddish language and literature, and Soviet Jewish history, which, as we know, contains also Polish and American Jewish histories, among others. Each of these topics alone could have easily consumed one man's life work. It is Estraich's expensive expertise in all of the above, as evidenced by his ability to work across media, methods, and chronologies, which makes his work distinctly vital. I'm a little excited, sorry. His writing is critical, direct, and sets an uncompromising standard of research for the discipline. If this sounds intimidating or inaccessible, it simply means that you haven't yet had the chance to read his work. Pick up any given essay or a book authored by Estraikh, and you will find a generous scholar. It is with much the same generosity and to a similarly impeccable standard that Estraikh directs the Schwindler Project for the history of the Jews of the Soviet Union at NYU. The collaborative project, a 6-volume work in print and online, puts forth the comprehensive history of Soviet Jewry and surveys previously unseen archival material. And it is with the same generosity and to the same impeccable standard that he co-edits the invaluable Legenda series titled Studies in Yiddish, the only English language scholarly publication dedicated entirely to studies in Yiddish. The series has published 20 titles to date, with several more forthcoming. It considers multilingual contexts, unaccounted for institutional histories, and overlooked relations across disparate arenas of cultural production. Topics explored range from key figures, literary centers and peripheries, and Yiddish literary genres. The most recent volume, a personal favorite, is titled Building Modern Jewish Culture, the Yiddish Kulturliga. Published in August, the volume focuses on the history and creative output of the most significant organizational network devoted to the development of modern Yiddish culture. Among Professor Estraich's publications are In Harness, Yiddish Writer's Romance with Communism from 2005, 1929, Mapping the Jewish World, a book he co-authored with Hasia Diner in 2013, for which they received the American National Jewish Book Award. Yiddish Literary Life in Moscow, 1917 till 1991, which was published in Russian in 2016, and Yiddish Culture in Ukraine, published the same year in Ukrainian. Transatlantic Russian Jewishness, Ideological Voyages of the Yiddish Daily Forwards in the first half of the 20th century, published in 2020, and most recently, and the topics of today's talk, the History of Birobidzhan, Building a Soviet Jewish Homeland in Siberia, published in 2023. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gennady Estraikh.
Thank you so much. This is such a presentation. Yes, so Birobidzhan. I had a chance to be born in Birobidzhan. I never realized this chance, but I had a chance. The thing is that my parents before the war lived in one of the 5 Jewish national districts that existed in the European part of the Soviet Union, and quite often it's forgotten that such units, territorial, ethnic units existed in the Soviet Union, and the units disappeared. Disappeared, maybe not the right term, during the Second World War, and my parents were toying with an idea to go to Birobidzhan and to settle there. And for some reason that actually I never asked why, but for whatever reasons they changed their decision. They changed their plans and settled in Ukraine. So, but still, Birobidzhan, somehow it was in my mind, and I remember how I believe, early 1960s, my parents took me to cinema, and I watched this what is it, seekers of happiness, released once again because it was after the rehabilitation of one of the actors here. Beginning from the 1990s, from time to time, I published articles about Birobidzhan, around Birobidzhan. So when this series, what is the Russian Shorts, they asked me, would you write something for us? And what would you write? I just said, why not Birobidzhan? I've never been to Birobidzhan, yes. Because once there was a chance to be born and a chance to visit Birobidzhan. I was at that time in Moscow at the journal Soviet Jewish Homeland, the Yiddish journal in Moscow, literally, and I asked the editor, who was considered to be the first poet of Birobidzhan, to send me to Birobidzhan to see it. And he told me, there is nothing to do in Birobidzhan. So as a result, my second chance was not realized. I wrote this book also with an idea. You know, everyone who deals with Soviet Jewish history knows about the campaign of liquidation of illiteracy. So there's some idea, because Birobidzhan, what is Birobidzhan? You know, I've been teaching at NYU. It's my 21st season, yes, of teaching. And in 21 years, I met 2 undergraduate students who reacted to this Birobidzhan. What is Birobidzhan? One of them turned out to be a grandson of an American lady who went to build Birobidzhan, but very soon realized that it was something off, and she returned. But in any case, in the family, the notion of Birobidzhan survived. And another one, it was an exchange student from Israel who told me, yes, I remember something, the last grade at the Israeli school, it was mentioned, yes. Otherwise, Birobidzhan is an unknown entity. As an indication how unknown it is, I received a few versions of the cover. This was only the one without a church. All other covers were really with the church in in Russian Orthodox Church in the center of Birobidzhan. For some reason, I decided that this will be more appropriate. So let's start the story of Birobidzhan, and it actually starts. What I want actually, the time is limited, and I want to focus on 2 sides of the story. One side of the story, it's that it started in 1928, in March 1928, the whole campaign, and of establishing something significant. And there's something significant, according to the census of the Soviet population, the last census of the Soviet population in 1989, gave the following result, that the Jewish population of, by that time it was already called the Jewish Autonomous Region, was 8.9 thousand people. So a clear indication of absolute failure, yes, absolute failure. So almost 70 years later, we see this result. So I want to focus on the catalog of failures that resulted. It is one part. And the second part, I want to focus on, maybe it sounds strange after failures, on the significance of Birobidzhan. So first of all, the catalog of failures. 1928, it was hard to find a year that couldn't be really so horrible for this project. Because 1928, it was the beginning of industrialization. So the beginning of the 5-year plans, the end of the new economic policy. And as a result, there were numerous opportunities for Jews to find a job, to move to another place, to move to find a place at a new construction and a new building, and to do it in the European part of the country, and to go to a place somewhere 8 time zones from Moscow, you know. So this was number one. So it was really, difficult to find people. The second one, around the same time, that from the very beginning, it was a very strange idea. The idea was initially to avoid bringing to the Far East people who already had qualification, who already had a job, a profession. No, they're already productive. We need to bring some people who are actually declass elements, who are good for nothing. And can you imagine to bring people good for nothing and telling them, boys and girls, build something significant, yes? Also, what was really, what they were trying to avoid just young people, full of enthusiasm or madness, to go to Birobidzhan and to build. This was fundamentally wrong. This had a very strong smell of Zionism, nationalism, or something else. Families. So can you imagine, it was not just to bring good for nothing people, but to bring families of people who are really, couldn't find a place yet for themselves. In any case, this was number two. Number three, apparently from the very beginning, the idea was that once again, the American this joint will help us. The old organization for rehabilitation for training is going to help us, and so on. They didn't realize that they really wouldn't be involved in this project. To them, it was, I'll stop on this why. Yeah, but in any case, the international help, the help that actually helped to build the these ethnic units in the European part of the country, and in general, helped to build the whole Jewish agricultural settlement project, they decided not to be involved. Yes, they decided not to be involved because they were essentially sulking. We've invested millions and millions in the project, in Crimea, in Ukraine, and now 8 time zones. Yeah, so they said no. Of course, various organizations, pro-Soviet communist organizations, actually in 16 countries, they started raising money and sent various stuff, and finally some people came to build Birobidzhan. But they were communist organizations, and not simply because they were communist, they were marginal organizations compared to such a monster as the joint. The joint with the possibility of raising money. But in addition, even the monster at the time had serious problems. 1928, next year, 1929, depression. It was really the budget of the joint collapsed. The budget of the odd survived to a significant degree, thanks to what? To the fact that they found significant sponsorship in South Africa, of all places. One of the heads of the odd spent a year in South Africa raising money, and as a result, this organization kept afloat. So as a result, it is no coincidence that the joint in 1930 moved out from Ukraine and returned to Ukraine only to help the Jewish villages, the Jewish colonies, when this period came in 1932, 1933, what is known as the Holodomor. Then the joint came and helped actually Jewish village dwellers to survive. Yeah, I know the stories from my family, how they survived to a significant degree thanks to the joint. So this 1928 was a year that was not the best year, yes. Then why 1928? Why the Soviet government decided to do it really in 1928? We have no idea. This actually shows the level of scholarship on Birobidzhan, and my scholarship as well, actually, because I couldn't find a clear answer. Yeah? The archival material on Birobidzhan, to a significant degree, is not available. One letter, I managed to get access to a letter thanks to having a friend from Birobidzhan, and this person in Birobidzhan had as a friend a member of the Russian Duma. And from the Russian Duma, as a deputy, he asked to declassify one letter, and I received it. There was nothing secret, but any letter sent or issued by the Central Committee or some top governmental authorities remained classified. The archive in Birobidzhan is not so much classified, but the problem that they don't have anyone who can read Yiddish. So as a result, everything in Yiddish is classified, just in case. Just in case, you never know what is your. I received something, once I received 20 kilos of minutes of something, but the minutes were in Russian, and I asked once again through the back door in Birobidzhan to do it here. So this is what we can only guess why 1928. One guess is, it's once again the end of the new economic policy, and they rightly understood that many Jews who owned a store, who an artisan or something else, that they would end up losing their job. So it was important to move them somewhere. 1928, around that time, they were also thinking that, look, the territory is very sensible. It's a border, China, whatever. It's important to reinforce. So, and in addition, apparently, there was another consideration. In the Soviet Union, there was a very strict system of dividing. This is a nation, this is a national group, this is something else, the whole classification that was introduced in 1913 by Stalin, and it became really the foundation for the nationalities policy. According to such yardsticks, Jews didn't represent a nation. There was no territory. It was essential, it was important to have a territory according to the definition of a nation. What is the territory? There's 5 districts. It's not a territory. Let's give them a territory. And they gave a huge territory. It's usually described as a Belgian and a half. Yes. And it is more significant in square miles, yes, than Palestine, than Crimea. So it was very significant. So apparently it was a combination of the 3 reasons. And it started. It started where to find people who would like to, especially as initially, they focused on finding people who were really not employed or whatever. Their descriptions, even in the Soviet press, you can find really very negative articles describing, okay, they brought a group of people, some of them without a leg, some of them without a hand, and 5 prostitutes from Babruisk and so on. They give a catalog of people who were sent from the local authorities. So it was not clear how to use it. The second, what was that really the place itself was a difficult place. It is a place that was extremely underpopulated. This entire Belgian and a half had only 30,000 people, mainly Russian Cossacks and Koreans. This was the main ethnic groups. And they essentially, this group populated the only area suitable for agriculture, because the remaining part of this Belgian and a half were forests or something else, that was really, it demanded quite significant investment of everything, to make it usable. The only more or less significant, if it can be called significant, settlement was called, and the name was right, Tikhonye. Quiet, even very quiet, yes, not Tiche, but Tikhonye, yeah? Small quiet, yes. According to various sources, the population of this Tikhonye was sometimes it's 600, sometimes 800,000. A railway station, 800 stop, hundreds. And it was a railway station that usually one train would stop a day. So it was really a very quiet place. This place actually would become the foundation for the city, contemporary city called Birobidzhan. So initially the area was called Birobidzhan, but finally when Tikhonka was transformed into a city, initially it was transformed into a settlement as a status, and finally into a city, this term Birobidzhan was attached to the city, and the area received different terms. So the city, for a while, there was a project of building a wonderful city. And the architect was invited, really an excellent architect, a person who came from Germany. He was Swiss, but he came from Germany. His name was Hannes Meyer. And he had to come to the Soviet Union because he was pro-communist and he lost his job in Germany. So he came with a group of other architects, and he developed a project of a wonderful city. They invested a lot of time and a lot of effort and fantasy of building the project. But when they finished building the project or developing the project, it turned out that the site that they allocated for the future city was already occupied by a military unit. Gone. And I believe even now it's a military, some kind of party or military unit is stationed in the area. So the city was built, just one illustration. In Birobidzhan, sewage is essential, yes. What is it for a city? Yeah? A friend of mine actually suggested even a definition, what is a shtetl and what is a town, yes? A shtetl is a place without sewage, yes? So as a result, we have that in Birobidzhan, sewage was built around 1962, yes? I'm not going to describe you how it used to be. Second, what is also important, it was how to build, what of, yes, wooden constructions. There's a memoir, wonderful memoir about Birobidzhan. It is a sad piece of memoir, but a very well written and interesting by Shifra Lifshitz, who one of the numerous Jews who came from Poland to build socialism in the Soviet Union, and the bulk of them, of course, ended building the socialism in the Gulag. Yeah, but before she was arrested, she went to Birobidzhan to be a teacher there. So she was so happy that she was allocated a room, a separate room, because initially when she arrived, she lived in a room where there were 3 beds. One bed was occupied by a not very young teacher, a man, who came and was waiting for his family to join him. Another bed was occupied by a young couple who met on their way to Birobidzhan, and in the meantime, they had, and number 3, it was her bed. Yes, so this was the beginning of her accommodation in Birobidzhan, and therefore she was happy that in one of the new builds, wooden new builds, the decision was not to build restrooms, but instead to allocate the space to a room. So she received a room that, according to the project, was supposed to be a restroom. So this is what kind of any descriptions that you have, even very sympathetic descriptions of communists coming from various countries, it's usually one motive is central: mud. Yes, so it was important to cross a road afterwards. Another problem that stopped the whole this progress, because still, despite all the problems, people were coming. Their retention was, every second would come, and afterwards, during the same year, disappear. During the first year, 60% of those who arrived actually left. But still, some people settled in the area, in Birobidzhan, or in some villages built in the area. But the second problem came repressions, 1937. So by the time, in 1934, the place received its name, the Jewish Autonomous Region, and it was announced that this Jewish Autonomous Region was a temporary name, because the region was in the minds of those who were in charge, was on the way to becoming a republic. So temporary, it's region. Even now, it's region. Yeah, we'll talk about why it remains region. So still, by the time of 1934, 1936, 1937, some intellectuals came and settled in Birobidzhan. In 1937, it was planned to convene a conference that would announce that Birobidzhan is the center of Soviet Jewish life, and actually, in general, a center of the entire proletarian Jewish life worldwide. Yeah. It never happened. It never happened because a half of those who were supposed to deliver something to speak during the conference, by the time of the conference scheduled for May the 7th, 1937, they already had been arrested. Some of them were already executed. So these arrests, executions, really stopped the developments. Because in Birobidzhan, there was a significant proportion of those who came with quite questionable biography. They came from Poland, God forbid, from the United States. They came from various countries. And of course, if from Poland, so you are a Polish spy. If from the United States, you are an American spy. Yeah, some were accused of being Japanese spies for whatever reasons. In any case, it really devastated the community. Even the leadership of this Jewish Autonomous Region, a few times they changed. One person was appointed, then arrested. Another person appointed, once again arrested. Finally, in 1938, a stable person emerged there. His name was Hirsch Sukharev. And Hirsch Sukharev survived the repressions, and he remained the head of this place until 1943. And he started thinking what to do with this region. The entire region by that time had 18,000 Jews. Yes. So, and he wrote letters to the Central Committee and so on. We don't have enough children to send to Yiddish schools. The number of copies printed for the local newspaper, Birobidzhan Erstein, it is 1,000 only, and hardly we can find a readership for this 1,000 people. So we have to do something. He wrote it actually not in 1938, he wrote it in 1939, after the annexation of the territories in the West, half of Poland, the Baltic countries, yes. And his idea was to bring tens of thousands of Jews to Birobidzhan. Great idea. It's a number of people who had a chance to survive. But a commission came to the city and around the city, and they realized that there's no accommodation, there's no job. So the decision was, okay, let's take a couple of years and prepare the infrastructure and bring, the idea was to bring at least 40,000 people. Of course, it never happened. It never happened because June 1941, the war came to the Soviet Union. What also played a role that we know that 1.5 million of Jews during the Second World War evacuated to various areas of the Soviet Union. And in many places, the Jewish population jumped up. And many people actually stayed after the war, yes, stayed put. But the evacuation didn't reach Birobidzhan. Even Jewish institutions like Jewish theaters, there was a Jewish academic unit in Kyiv or something else, they were sent to Central Asia or some other places, not to Birobidzhan, apparently for two reasons. One reason may be less important is the distance, God knows where. And second, apparently more significant, it was the area that was in the preparation to possible, and we know that in reality there was a war across the border, there was the Japanese army. So as a result, the evacuation that potentially also had a chance, the whole process to increase the population, it didn't happen. In the meantime, this Hirsch Sukharev, he was removed somewhere. Actually, it wasn't really repression. He was just reappointed to a different place. And a new person was appointed, Alexander Bakhmutsky, an assimilated Jewish person, just 32, young. And he decided once again that it was the right time to raise the status of Birobidzhan, to ask the central authorities to send to Birobidzhan those who had been uprooted as a result of the war. I didn't want to come to return to the places that became actually cemeteries here, cemeteries. So he wrote, okay, let's return to the project of building a republic. So the project of building a republic was immediately, the idea, rejected. But a few decrees or some documents issued by the central authorities actually organized after the Second World War a wave of resettlement to Birobidzhan. And in 1946-47, it's where my parents were thinking about going to Birobidzhan. Yeah, my father was still, well, luckily, he was kept in the army longer, yeah, in Germany. In any case, about 10,000 people came to Birobidzhan, settled. Many of them were actually those who lived before the war in the Jewish national districts in Ukraine and in Crimea. There was a separate actually exercise of finding Jewish doctors and send to send to Birobidzhan, Jewish teachers and so on. So it was a revival that finished in 1948, when actually the entire infrastructure of Jewish life in the Soviet Union was really ruined as a result of repression. The Jewish Anti-Fascist Committee was closed and so on and so on. Yeah. So in the last years of Stalin's time, this happened. In Birobidzhan, once again, a wave of persecutions. The leadership of the region was sentenced to death, replaced generously with 25 years in prison, yes. And they were accused of sending to the United States sensitive material. What kind of a sensitive material? The organization, the main organization that raised money for Birobidzhan here in the United States, at that time it was called Ambidjan, wanted to use for their public relations exercise some images of Birobidzhan. So they made a photo. This is a school. This is cinema. This is something else, and sent. Now, of course, it was reinterpreted as sensitive material. Yeah, as a result, this penalty. And Birobidzhan actually disappeared from any news. No one knew what was going on there for a long period of time. And it stayed actually excluded from any publicity more or less until 1955, 1956, when a couple of journalists were allowed to come to Birobidzhan, a journalist from writing for the New York Times and so on. Some article appeared that, something is happening there. And from that time, in the entire period after the Second World War, Birobidzhan actually wasn't present more or less. From time to time, Birobidzhan appeared in a scandal. For example, by the end of 1958 and beginning of 1959, there was a rumor that actually was published in the New York Times and whatever, in various newspapers, that the Soviet government was preparing forced resettlement of Jews to Birobidzhan. Yeah. So there was a rumor, and there's a whole story around this rumor. And actually, to a significant degree, thanks to this rumor, as a reaction to show, no, we are good to Jews, Yiddish publishing was renewed in the Soviet Union because it happened in 1959, the centenary, Sholem Aleichem's centenary. So they published a volume in Yiddish stories by Sholem Aleichem. This was the beginning of the revival of Yiddish publishing in general in the Soviet Union. And I can continue. There were another short moments of reappearance, one day long reappearance or 2 day long reappearance of a news from Birobidzhan. But in general, it was really a remote area, an area where people already had sewage, where people, there were new factories emerged. People somehow lived in Birobidzhan proper in the city. It was still a minority, but a very significant minority, Jewish minority. So about 40% maybe of the population was Jewish. At that in Birobidzhan, it wasn't wrong to appoint a Jewish person as a manager. In 1917, the party boss was appointed, Boris Shapira, Jewish. It was really some token, some signs that it was a Jewish place. To finish this whole story, I can tell you that in 1991, almost the entire happy Jewish population of Birobidzhan moved to Israel. And I loved very much, it is really interesting that they moved together with their top Soviet figures. So for a while, I don't know how it's now, but for a while in Israel, there were two Birobidzhan organizations in the northern part of Israel and in the southern part of Israel. In the northern part of Israel, I believe the second secretary of the regional party committee was in charge from Birobidzhan. In the south, something of this kind. Yes, so it was really almost the entire population moved out. Still, there are some Jews in Birobidzhan, yeah, and there is some miracle. I mentioned 8.9, and there was next census after this entire moving out that showed that the population, Jewish population, was suddenly 16,000. Why? Because half Jewish, quarter Jewish. Now it was nice to be Jewish. If you are Jewish, you get a support from the same joint, or you have something else. So it was a different understanding of Jewishness. Now, what was the significance of Birobidzhan for Jewish history? The significance was essentially negative. Negative in what sense? In the structure of the Soviet Union, that was a kind of a Russian doll, a matryoshka. One doll inside another doll, Union Republic, autonomous republic, autonomous region. Each of the level of such levels had a set of entitlements. A Union Republic, Academy of Science, universities, and so on and so forth. Yes. Autonomous republics, usually the first 4 classes in this ethnic language, local ethnic language, and something else, also academic institutions. For a region, hardly anything, some token science. the problem was that this status of a territory, so Jews became really a Soviet Jewish nation because there was a territory that is, the status of the territory actually defined to a significant degree the entitlements of the entire ethnic group. Ukrainians had one set of entitlements in the entire country. Jews somehow were classified bureaucratically as a nation with a region. Yes. And as a result, it reflected. So from time to time, there was a talk, and okay, let's arrange a Yiddish theater to show the West we have a Yiddish theater. And officially, it was attached to Birobidzhan. It was based in Moscow, but their salary would come from Birobidzhan. It was important to have the editor of Soviet Jewish Homeland with his Birobidzhan pedigree. People were looking for a replacement for the chief rabbi of Moscow. They found an electrician from Birobidzhan and sent him to Budapest to be trained as a rabbi, but he was a person with a Birobidzhan pedigree, and so on and so forth. So the last point that I want to touch on, if we look now and this Russia, the map, it is only one place is called as national autonomous region. All other regions in the 1990s, early 1990s, became republics. The Jewish autonomous region also had a chance to become a republic. So everyone could, it was a decision, make republics. So in all the places, there was a kind of a referendum or something else, and decision, okay, now we're a republic, and the central authorities redefined it, and it is now inscribed in the constitution. In the Jewish autonomous region, the situation was different. First of all, the bulk of the Jews was sitting on the suitcases. They didn't care what the public. Second, the local population said, no way. There was a rumor, even published in the local press, that if we become a republic, there's a good chance of being annexed by whom? By Israel. Israel is next door, yes, from Birobidzhan. So, and people took it really for face value. So there was a danger, to end up in the hands of this horrible Israelis or whatever. So, number one. And actually, two, because the region was divided into districts, rural districts. People in 2 districts, they announced, in case you do this here, this republic, we depart from the region, we attach ourselves to Khabarovsk or to some other place and so on. So it was the decision, okay, let's not even start dealing with a referendum, and the compromise was found. The compromise was, okay, you are staying as a Jewish autonomous region, but during the entire period, from the very beginning till the very end of the Soviet Union, it was really, the region wasn't directly linked with Moscow. It was actually part of the greater region, Khabarovsk region, that in Russian it was Krai. Yes, it is also a region, but a different, usually for a broader territory. It's Krai, it is broader and usually next to the borders of the Soviet Union. So the decision was, okay, now you are a region, but not in the Krai, not in the Khabarovsk region, but you are directly linked with Moscow. This is the end, more or less, of the story. Yeah, at least the time, and I believe I spoke longer than I was supposed to. Thank you. Yeah. If there are questions.
Let's take some questions. Thank you for what was the best tragic comic relief of the day. I know that we have some questions. Yes, let's see. Jeremy, why don't you start?
Gennady, thank you so much for this warm, wonderful presentation. As Noah just put it wonderfully, this sort of tragic comedy. And that's actually what I wanted to ask you about was there's a lot of laughter in the room. And I wanted to ask you about sort of if there was, I mean, I'm interested in comedy, any comic response, any satiric response at the time in the late 20s and the early 30s. I imagine the Soviet Union, it would have been hard to do that, but in American Yiddish press, was there anybody sort of making fun of this project, and who and how, if so?
So I don't remember humor. Yeah, maybe, but certainly there were numerous articles. What is the point? What is the point? What is the point? Why? So okay, you want to bring people who are not trained, yes? Who is going to build it, yes? And if you find such people, how can you guarantee that a person who can't find a job, say in Bobruisk, can be useful in? So no, of course, there was a lot. There was a very short moment in 1934 when the Soviet Union, because of course I compressed the whole story, it was a long story. In 1934, the Soviet Union announced, okay, we'll open the borders for immigration of foreign Jews to settle in Birobidzhan. It is no coincidence that the film, The Seekers of Happiness, was released in 1936, and actually in some states in the United States, it was forbidden as Soviet propaganda. Actually, it was, but in any case, this was more or less the time. And in 1933, the diplomatic relations in November were established between the Soviet Union and the United States. And the first ambassador traveled to the United States through Birobidzhan. Yeah, and afterwards he wrote articles and gave some talks. A wonderful place, no anti-Semitism, yeah, so it's wonderful. Yeah, but and actually some people were allowed to come and to settle, but it was very short. But of course, at the same time, in other periodicals, in other newspapers, there were articles, for God's sake, what for? What for? Yeah, of course. Yeah, yes.
Thank you so much for this really great talk. So I have a question about, again, responses to the establishment of Birobidzhan. And I'm wondering if there were any sociological or ethnographic studies that were produced. So I'm thinking of something like Chekhov's Sakhalin portrait that he produced after he visited the region, and he was thinking about it as a place of, like, you know, that possesses the potential for like moral and spiritual rebirth through work. But like the prison sort of made that an impossible project. So Birobidzhan is not a prison, but it is so isolated and, you know, so separated from the center of Soviet power. Yeah, I'm just wondering if there were any sort of like spiritual or moral responses to this kind of project.
Oh, plenty. Hilarious. For example, David Bergelson was a great enthusiast of Birobidzhan. He wrote that, you know, the sun in Birobidzhan is different. It shines 4 times better than in Ukraine. Somehow he could calculate exactly 4 times better. Yeah. So yeah, of course, there were various things. There were here in the United States for the communist camp, Birobidzhan was #1. There was a camp, a summer camp for communist kids, and they had a corner somewhere, a corner in the territory that they called Birobidzhan. And every season that they would go to the corner, and the ritual was of baking potato and singing some songs about Birobidzhan. Yes, So yeah, Birobidzhan was widely used. One of the teachers of this communist network, he published a book, a bilingual book, and it's absolutely utopian. That, you know, people spend 4 hours doing something, afterwards they go for lunch, then they go to a theater, then they do something else. Yeah, so absolute utopias. Yeah, that is healthy, of course, and then people are strong, and yeah, a lot. Some observers, especially who was one of the enthusiasts of Birobidzhan, his name was Benzion Goldberg, one of the Sholem Aleichem's son-in-laws. Yeah, he was a journalist. He was not a communist, but he really loved it. But he came to Birobidzhan and he wrote that, look, and he also traveled in the Soviet Union. And so my impression that somewhere in Paris, in Buenos Aires, or in New York, it is easier to find people enthusiastic about Birobidzhan than in Bobruisk or somewhere else. So it was, yeah. But people believe that it was great. There was literature, propaganda literature. So. Yes, Albert.
There is a newspaper out of Birobidzhan that I heard is not bad. It's a Yiddish newspaper. And also, I don't know if they have radio programs in Yiddish and they have classes. As a symbol, is it a symbol now for other Soviet Jews or not who are interested in Yiddish?
So there's a wonderful woman. Her name is Elena Starashevskaya. She's Russian, ethnically Russian. Do you know, in 1989, one of the problems of Birobidzhan was that it didn't have a university. So as a result of not having the university, young people would go. Some of them would come back, you know, being a doctor or something, a teacher, but the bulk of them actually, those who studied elsewhere, of course, never returned to Birobidzhan. And finally, as late as 1989, there was a pedagogical institute as a university opened in Birobidzhan. And initially they established a department or a stream training teachers for Yiddish and English. So there was one or two groups of teachers, actually, of people who were trained, and Elena Starashevskaya, but all of them emigrated finally, or something else, or ended up being teachers of English. Yeah. But Elena Starashevskaya is an enthusiast, and she runs, it's not the entire newspaper, it's once a week, a page that she heroically somehow runs, heroically, but with the support of the state, of the local authorities, because I mentioned that they, after the early 1990s, they bypassed the authorities of the Khabarovsk region, so directly to Moscow, and as a result, they get more from Moscow. And they're afraid, as we say in Yiddish, they zittern. They were afraid that if they're not Jewish enough, they end up once again under Khabarovsk. So they sponsor various exercises to prove we're Jewish enough. We do it. In Birobidzhan, of course, there is no, it is not one, but two synagogues, just in case, here with this handful of Jews, a Chabad and not Chabad. So this explains why this newspaper gets financial support, yes. But how many people read it? And radio, maybe there's some radio, yeah, but it is token, just token. Once. There was one summer school, yes, Shevet, no, maybe 10 years ago or so, yeah.
Thank you very much. Two questions, three actually. So Yevsekhtsia, right? Was Yevsekhtsia anyhow involved of planning this project at all? Because they disappeared a year after, right? So that's the first question. The second question, was there any financing from Armand Hammer to this project? Armand Hammer, the American industrialist. And the third question, was it some way a response to the increase of the Zionist movement from Central and Eastern Europe to Palestine from the Soviet point of view?
So, thank you for your question. This is a very interesting thing that it seems that the whole project of Birobidzhan was cooked initially without any participation of the Jewish section or other Jewish organizations. Moreover, the Jewish organizations were quite puzzled initially, and they didn't know why. We have Crimea is going quite successfully, and Ukraine. So they were skeptical, but there was an order from above, and they followed. So they, from what I could find, they were instructed to follow. Yes, Hama wasn't involved in Birobidzhan. As for the Zionist project, of course, there were pamphlets published that look, it's Birobidzhan and what is Zionism here. So the idea, even as late as 1959, an article in Izvestia, Pravda, it was a huge article that was published. It's such a wonderful place, Birobidzhan. Jews are happy, and what is Israel? Yeah. So of course, this sort of parallels you can find in huge numbers here in the Soviet propaganda. Of course, yeah. They used it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was just curious if during World War II, since you're calling it a Soviet Jewish homeland, between August 1939 and June 1941, when the Soviet Union was in a pact with Germany, were there ever attempts by Birobidzhan Jews to help German Jews get visas to Birobidzhan as, I don't know, like a middle way between, onward to other places, or just as a permanent?
There was a very short exchange between the German government and the Soviet government. The Germans actually suggested take some Jews. Yes, not necessarily to Birobidzhan, but take some Jews. Yes, and the Soviets said no. This is as short as it was really. No, Birobidzhan Jews couldn't make such an attempt. It was only the government could do it. Yeah, but there was no. Thank you. Okay.
My question is about the rumor that you mentioned that Stalin was planning to expel all the Jews from Soviet Union and Birobidzhan. Like, how did it came about, and is it in any way connected to Doctor's plot?
So there was another rumor. I believe you imply that there was another rumor around the time of the Doctor's plot, about the expulsion. Yeah, but it is different. There's another rumor, was a rumor in the Soviet Union. This rumor in 1958, 1959, it was outside the Soviet Union. And apparently it's not clear, the origin is not clear. Apparently it was a combination of a few things. One thing was that there was a preparation of a new Congress of the Communist Party, number 21. And it was really in February 1959, a Congress that the agenda was, an important part of the agenda, the development of Siberia and the Far East. So maybe somewhere in the corridor, someone actually mentioned, why not to increase something or resettlement to the Jewish autonomous region, and maybe this leak somehow reached Israel. Because in Israel, beginning from the early 50s, there was this organization, Lishka, yes, that its mission was a secret organization. Now it exists, but it is not secret, I believe, anymore. In any case, the mission of this organization was to push Soviet Jews to emigrate or to prepare themselves to immigration to Israel. Because the information that I could get about this rumor comes from this organization and from Israel. So these organizations actually briefed the American Jewish Committee, which played a very important role. In 1959, there was a visit. By the end of 1959, Khrushchev came to the United States, and there was a historical visit, a lot of noise around this. But before he visited the United States, a couple of leading figures, Soviet figures, came to touch and to take the temperature here. And the first person who came was Anastas Mikoyan, who was a very important figure in the Soviet hierarchy. He was ethnically Armenian. And he came ostensibly to spend his vacations in the United States. This is officially vacation, yeah, but certainly such a vacation that he had even a meeting with the president. But suddenly he realized that every time when he faced journalists, the question number one was about the expulsion of Jews. So he had a meeting, finally, he had a meeting with the American Jewish Committee. And the American Jewish Committee came out from this meeting. It's difficult to understand. Either they believed Mikoyan, that was just a rumor, or they decided that they managed to save the Jewish people of Birobidzhan, or of the Soviet Union. In any case, it was officially announced. It's a rumor, it's nothing. And it was here. This is how it happened here. It was the end of the room.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a 5-minute break, perhaps. 15 minutes break, and then we're going to